Well, thank you very much. It's my pleasure then to welcome on stage Imtiaz. He's going to speak to us about organizational agility from a complex systems perspective. Very briefly is an engineer by background. He does have quite an extensive career in various industries spanning banking and telecoms. And over to you, Imtiaz. Please help me welcome Imtiaz.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me? I can hear myself, so that's good. So, before I kick into organizational agility, just wanted to tell you guys a little story. And this story revolves around the first time I left school, and I wanted to join university. Paid the money, decided to do robotics. Entered my first class, and the professor stood in front, saying like how I'm standing in front of you, and he says, I'm basically not going to teach anybody that doesn't answer my first question. My response was, what the? I mean, yeah, I'm paying this guy a shitload of money, and he's telling me he hasn't taught me a single thing, but I need to answer his question. So anyway, the entire class was also the same way, and we tried to answer his question, and his question was, anybody can tell me the answer to 1 and 1? And like you, we all also stunned, like 1 and 1, what does it mean? I mean, is the answer, anybody want to take a guess what the answer would be? Anybody? 2? 1, 11. Yes, you're all wrong. So you see, like that little being that we all want to achieve in the previous presentation, moving from the chimpanzee to the electronic being that's lying over there with a little sign of BMW. I don't know how many of you noticed the BMW sign. So those of you that don't like BMW, you're not reaching the future. So basically it says, in order for you to design a solution to an answer, you've got to know the context of the question. So without understanding the context of the question, you cannot design an intelligent answer. So what I'm about to give you here is context, not necessarily the answer. So for you to create a little bit of understanding around concepts of organizational agility. Now the previous presentation that we all saw spoke about culture. And funny enough, it alludes very nicely with this presentation, because this presentation alludes to culture as well. So it's not about the tools or the processes or about Agile. It's about understanding the concepts around Agile and applying them from an organizational perspective. So basically, organizational agility is a new type of business strategy. It's a strategy where, in African context, everybody's trying to strive towards. Everybody wants to have an agile organization. But nobody necessarily wants to be agile in the context of an organization. Everybody wants to do agile. Scrumming, like they mentioned in the previous thing. Everybody wants to have stand-ups. Everybody wants to do XP. Everybody wants to do agile in some form or fashion. But no organization necessarily wants to put in enablers in place from an organizational perspective that supports the delivery of agile. And that's where the difference lies. Culture, being versus doing. You cannot be if you don't merge the two. The practice and the principle have to merge in order for you to actually be a truly agile organization. Now, organizational agility is basically a new relevant term. Around about 1991, the American and European countries realized that their organizations were falling floor to organizations from the Asian markets. Within the Asian markets, they were able to adapt and respond to change a lot faster. I mean, heavens forbid, China, India, they're the guys at the forefront of organizational agility. Who would have thought? America and UK actually now follows the Asian markets and the Indian markets and they're at the back front of these two markets. So let us take a stab at defining Agile. All right. Now we're not going to define Agile in the context of a perfect definition. We're going to look at terms. Anticipate. People talk about anticipation in the form of you've got to create anticipation in your market from an Agile perspective, because anticipation is what's going to get people to buy your next product. Look at innovate. Now this is not, and I come from a banking industry, where every bank wants to follow the next bank. I'll give you an example, a personal example. There was a bank where I worked in around about 2005 to 2007 where we implemented voice banking, proof of concept and the pilot. In 2014, 2015, I've had the pleasure of working for two banks that think they're innovating from a banking perspective by deploying voice biometrics. 2007 to 2014. That's not innovation. Innovation is about coming up with something new and then commercializing that idea. It's not about following the next competitor, although that's important, but it's not about following the next competitor. Learning. Organizations need to continuously learn. Responsiveness. Being able to adapt to very hectic changes and still survive in a thriving environment. Flexibility. I'm not as flexible as this guy, but organizations need to be as flexible as he is. Adaptable. Brilliant man. Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest that survive. It's the ones that are most adaptable to change. Resilience. It's being able to bounce back. Organizations that can bounce back by having competitors come up with an innovation or innovative product or disruptive change ahead of them, and then being able to bounce back and still compete. So remember I mentioned it's about doing Agile. It's not about being Agile. So how do you get from doing Agile to being Agile? You've got to embrace it. Why do you need to embrace it? You see, organizations live in a very complex environment. And this complexity is made up by a myriad number of things. You have your internal complexity and you have your external complexity. And your external complexity is basically everything that's done to you. And internal complexity is everything you do to yourself. And I mean, organizations these days are caught up with restructure upon restructure upon restructure, and you wonder sometimes, where the hell am I? Who the hell is running this organization? You're so internally focused that you forget about the external locus, things that are being done to you. And eventually you miss the opportunities. I mean, we all remember Nokia, eh? Nokia. I remember buying the first Nokia, I don't know what's it, 9210 or whatever they used to call it back then. And I'm giving my age away, but yeah, 9210. I mean, Nokia was at the forefront of cell phone technology. A couple of years back, they were bought off, even though they invented what they would call the Lumia, the forefront of technology as well. And the only reason why is because of these guys. So what does these guys do differently that Nokia didn't do? Anybody want to take a guess? Sorry? They adapted to change. Very close. I don't have a book, sorry. I could have given you a book here, but ThoughtWorks have, let me just check. No, they've taken all their books. So, but we'll catch them in the back alley then, we'll try and get you a book. So basically what they did was they created anticipation in the market. For example, who's waiting for the Samsung Galaxy 7 or whatever the next version of the Samsung Galaxy is? Most of you. Or if you're an iPhone person, iPhone 7. I mean, all of you guys want to anticipate and wait for an iPhone 7 or a Samsung Galaxy 7. You're waiting for a product that you're willing to pay a lot of money for, even though the product is not in existence at the moment. And that's what anticipation is about. The other thing that we get caught up with and this is directed to all the CEOs out there. There's an ambition from a CEO perspective. Everybody wants to either be a highly successful organization, an extremely growthful organization. They want to have autocratic leadership, so I say it's my way. And then they want to change, constantly change. Change everything, restructure, they want to change leadership, they want to change processes. If things change, then things are happening. If things are not changing, then things are not happening. The problem with this approach is that excessive in all four of these quadrants and you're likely to fail. And the reverse is also there, which is called the premature aging syndrome, whereby if you don't do anything, you're still not going to survive. And that's Nokia, for example. So you've got to be wary of the fact that even though you might want to change and you might want to grow and you might want to succeed, there's always a balance between success, growth, leadership, and change. So what I did was recently I kind of looked at complex systems. So I love complex theory. Dr. Russell Ackoff, for those of you that know him, brilliant man, was a management scientist. And he looks at managing organizations very different towards how we currently manage organizations. He looks at managing organizations not like how MBAs teach you. You know, you got to learn finance, you got to learn HR, you got to learn, I don't know what's the other ones, accounting. I'm not an MBA person, so I'm an engineer, so I don't like MBA. But he teaches managing organizations holistically. He's no longer around, God bless him. And like I mentioned, Charles Darwin, what he says, it's not about the strongest, it's about the most successful in terms of adapting to change. So when we looked at complex adaptive systems, it was, so what are the behaviors that are associated to these complex adaptive systems? And complex adaptive systems is all about biological change. You know, it's about systems that are able to adapt to their environments that are constantly changing. Even us, we as humans, we might think we're not changing, but we do. The way we interacted in 1970s is much different to the way we interact today. We might not have changed physically, but our behavior has changed. And that's the difference between emergent behavior versus physical changes in terms of emergence. I mean, if I approach Mr. Kolani, did I pronounce it right? See, he reacts differently. However, if I went to him and I said, Mr. X, he's going to react differently. So it's all about the interaction between the elements that create behavior. The other thing is about self-organization. Another term that's used very heavily in the world of Agile. You know, self-organization. We need to have self-organizing teams. But ask any executive out there, what is a self-organizing team? They tell you, no, teams that just fit together. No, it's not that. Self-organizing teams is about having teams the ability to create their own decisions, the ability for teams to morph their own structures and processes. These are about teams that belong in a single locus of control. There's no management hierarchy. There's no ladders, as Aslam pointed out before. There's no ladders around in an agile organization. And then it's the edge of chaos. There's equilibrium, there's chaos. Live in equilibrium and you live in a dream world. Live in chaos and you're most likely going to die. So you need to live in the balance between the two, equilibrium and chaos. What does this mean? Edge of chaos basically means I need to be able to survive, yet I need to be able to thrive, yet I need to be able to compete. And the only thing that's going to get you that is variety. So you need to be able to position yourself in a variety normal of forms. The other thing is distributed control. Remember I said autocratic leadership? It's not about autocratic leadership, it's about creating self-organizing teams where they have their own control. It's not about having CEOs, CFOs, COOs, directors, and senior managers. It's about having a difference between control and monitoring. Connectivity. Connectivity is an interesting thing because it's not the behavior that's determined by the elements that connect together. It's the behavior that comes out from two elements interacting with each other. It's how they communicate. What's the feedback? What's the response back? That determines the behavior of success or failure. Co-evolution. Co-evolution is all about saying, if I have a butterfly and I have a flower, the butterfly does not exist without the flower, and the flower cannot exist without the butterfly. The butterfly helps the flower pollinate, and in the same vein, the flower feeds the butterfly, and they coexist together. Think of the example where, I think it was Asus that came up with the first tablet around about the 1990s. Consumers were not ready for it. So therefore, that product never ever took off. However, now, almost every one of us has a tablet. So it's all about the timing. It's about co-evolving together. It's about organizations evolving with the consumers, not necessarily independent of each other. Suboptimal. And this is a dangerous one. And the only reason it's a dangerous one is because there's a difference between efficiency and effectiveness. Six Sigma, theory of constraints, lean. Everybody wants to aim for efficiency. Everybody wants to save the amount of money that all the other companies saved. I forget what those companies, General Electric saved a huge load of money by implementing Six Sigma and theory of constraints. Toyota implemented huge amounts of money by implementing what they call lean thinking. Now there is a balance in today's organizations between efficiency and effectiveness. And you've got to find that balance. So you've got to trade off between being effective or being efficient. And what that balance is, it's left up to the entire organization to figure that out. Iteration. It's about doing small things, not big things. Small things will get you to what big things will get you as well. It's about doing small things iteratively. You can wait 10 years for one big thing, or you can deliver 10 years of value through every year. So it's about doing the little things. And it's also about anticipating what's going to happen in the future. So the more you do little things, the more you are able to adapt a lot faster, because you are not delivering towards a 10-year journey, but you are delivering towards a future journey. And that's the difference. Aiming for a 10-year journey that's specific, or aiming for a future journey that's non-specific. Record with the variety, as I mentioned. You've got to live at the edge of chaos. You've got to create variety. Now, complex adaptive systems has one flaw. They do not continuously learn. So the new term out there is complex evolutionary systems. These are systems that are able to learn from their mistakes, able to put in learnings in place, and adapt accordingly. So, organizational agility means continuous interaction. Make sure you have feedback systems and you have response systems in place. Simplify. You've got to be able to keep your processes simple. Don't make things complex. Don't make things complicated. You can have a lot of simple systems, simple processes, simple architectures all linked to each other and still derive the same outcome. Self-organize. Balance control. Innovate. Make sure you are able to innovate and commercialize whatever you innovate. Co-evolution. Make sure organizations are able to co-evolve with their consumers and not independently of their consumers. Learn continuously. Organizations have to be able to learn continuously in the framework that learning never ends. Suboptimal, making sure you keep a balance between process effectiveness and efficiencies. Living at the edge of chaos, making sure that you have enough variety to make sure that you can catch up with your competition. And the last thing is, you've got to move away from doing, and you've got to be able to move towards being an agile organization. And that's where the success of organizational agility and the strategy will get you. That's me. Any questions?
Any questions?
Wait. Okay, don't sound like questions.
No questions.
Okay. Guys, will you please join me in thanking Imtiaz for his talk on complex agility. Just in terms of our program, we've run